Good morning, everyone. So I will be talking about notes, which, as you should all know, those are the 500 fields in a MARC record. And I'm only going to be talking them in regarding to audio recordings. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, so please post your questions in the chat box, or once the presentation is over, if I remember to, I will allow everybody to unmute themselves, so you will be able to ask it verbally if you have a mic and if you're in a quieter area. A PDF of these slides is already on L2, and then after the presentation, I'll add a PDF of the slides with the notes to L2. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started. So the agenda, we're going to talk about, just give an overview of all the 5XX fields. Well, not all of them, some of them. And then I'll have some music CD examples and then some audiobook examples. So the first part's a little boring, sorry. So if you could just sit there and daydream or something. Okay, so the first 500 is just the 500 and it's a general note. And if you're using ISBD punctuation, you need to be aware of the ending punctuation. Most of the 5XX fields end in a period, but not all of them do. The 500 field is required if applicable, and both indicators are blank, and the subfields are A, 3, 5, 6, and 8. A note that provides general information for which a specialized note field, in other words, a specific 5XX field, has not been defined. You can use for the following kinds of notes: bibliographic history, physical description enhancements, program notes, or series statements that cannot be accommodated in a 4XX field. And I recently cataloged a book that stated it was a volume 2, but that volume 1 had not been compiled yet. And that made me a little suspicious that there was ever going to be a volume 1. So I created a 500 note, Ramblin' Man Compilation Volume 2, and then in parentheses, volume 1 hasn't been compiled yet, and then close quotation and double dash title page, just in case if the author did actually create the volume 1 in the future. Okay, we also have the 505 field, which is the formatted contents note. This field is also optional. The first indicator can be 0 for contents, 1 for incomplete contents, sorry, 2 for partial contents, or an 8 for no display constant generated. The second indicator can be blank for basic and 0 for enhanced. Possible subfields are A, G, R, T, U, 6, and 8. A formatted contents note. Contents notes may be encoded at one of two levels, basic or enhanced. The use of enhanced or subfielded 505 notes is strongly encouraged to provide the level of detail allowed by RDA instructions. Contents notes contain the titles of separate works or parts of an item. They may also include statements of responsibility associated with the works or parts. Volume numbers and other sequential designations are included in a contents note, but chapter numbers are omitted. Hang on a second, I need to get a drink, sorry. Okay, the 508 field is the creation production credits note. And again, this field is required if applicable. Both indicators are blank, and there are only 3 subfields that can be used: A, 6, and 8. A note about the credits for individuals or organizations other than members of a cast who have participated in the artistic or technical production of the work to a significant degree. The display constant credits may be system supplied. The 511 field is for participant or performer note. This, again, is required if applicable. The first indicator can be 0 for no display constant generated or a 1 for the cast. Display constants were created when OCLC printed the bibliographic records on cards. However, if an ILS displays information according to the MARC fields and indicators, then when the first indicator is a 1, the label or display constant cast will be displayed. And when it's a 0, everything else will be displayed. The second indicator is blank. Possible subfields are A, 6, and 8. This again is a note about the participants, players, narrators, presenters, or performers. And depending on your library's ILS, this information may display differently or may not display at all. The 518 field is for the date, time, and place of an event. And this again is required if applicable. Both indicators are blank. Possible subfields are A, D, O, P, 0, 1, 2, 3, 6, and 8. The definition of this field is a note on the date, time, and or place of broadcast, capture, or creation associated with an event. Use this to include the date, time, and or place of broadcast, execution, and that's not the kind of, scary execution of killing someone, filming, recording, or in the case of a naturally occurring object, of finding. You will also use field 033 to enter this information in coded form, because librarians like to be like secret coders. At least that's how I like to look at myself. Okay, so guidelines for this field, you may use field 518 with either a single subfield A or multiple subfields, subfield D, subfield O, and subfield P. Again, follow your local practice and the guidelines below. So the single subfield A, you could have, for an example, 518 recorded in Memphis, Tennessee, October 3rd, 1959 by Samuel B. Charters. For the multiple subfields, you could have a 518 with subfield O recorded and then subfield P, Sun Studios. Or you could have a 518 subfield O filmed on location, subfield P, Havana, subfield D, February 2003. Regardless of the choice of subfield practice, with a single subfield A or multiple subfields, follow Mark 21 input conventions, which specify a period at the end of the field. If you're using multiple subfields, punctuation separating the elements is omitted. Okay, the 520, the summary field. This one's a fun one. This one is optional. The first indicator can be blank for summary, 0 for subject, 1 for review, 2 for scope and content, 3 for abstract, 4 for content advice, or 8 for no display constant generated. And again, the subfields are A, B, C, U, 2, 3, 6, and 8. An unformatted note that describes the scope and general contents of the described materials, used for an abstract, annotation, review, summary, or a phrase describing the material. The level of detail in a summary may vary depending on the audience for a particular item. When no distinction between levels of detail in a summary note is required, subfield A contains all the text. When a distinction is appropriate, subfield A contains a brief statement and subfield B contains additional information. And I know common practice was always to include the 520 field for children's materials, but it really is a nice field to have to explain what your item is all about for the patrons and yourself. Okay, the 538 field. So this is a system details note. This one is required if applicable. Both indicators are blank, and the possible subfields are A, I, U, 3, 5, 6, and 8. This is a note about the technical information for the item. Such information includes the absence or presence of certain kinds of codes or the physical characteristics of a computer file, such as blocking factors, mode of access, parity, recording densities, software programming language, computer requirements, peripheral requirements, trade name or recording systems, number of lines of resolution, and lastly, modulation frequency. The links to technical details relating to digital resources may also be recorded. Some of the information included in field 538 may also be recorded in such fields as 340, 344, 345, 346, and 347. So our next one is the 546 field, and this is the language note. This one is required if applicable. Both indicators are blank, and the possible subfields are A, B, 3, 6, and 8. And the textual information on the language or notation system is used to convey the content of the described materials. A description of the alphabet, script, or other symbol system, in other words, Arabic alphabet, ASCII, barcode, logarithmic graphing, may also be included, but for musical notation system terms, they prefer the field 348. Coded language information is contained in the fixed field element lang and or field 041. The 588 field is the source of description note. This field is required if applicable. The first indicator can be blank for no information provided, a 0 for source of description, and 1 for latest issue consulted. The second indicator is blank. Possible subfields are A, 5, 6, and 8. Information used for tracking and controlling the metadata contained in the record. It includes general and specific source of description notes that are of special interest to other catalogers. Use this for continuing resources and multi-part items to identify the issue, part, or iteration used as a basis for identification of the resource. For online resources, also include the date on which the resource was viewed for description. This field should be included for all items you're cataloging, even if the title is found on the preferred source. The preferred source for an audio recording is the disc itself, accompanying material, or the container. So let's look at our first example. This is the Heart of the Opera, which was cataloged by CMC staff for the Roosevelt University Library. And the opera was originally recorded in May and June of 1940, and the audio CD was published in 1982. So here are some of the Heart of the Opera 5XX fields. So I will briefly go over all the 500 fields on this slide. If you notice, the 5XX fields are not in numerical order. RDA has no prescribed order for note fields. You generally enter the notes in AACR2 order or as prescribed by other descriptive convention manuals, such as archival moving image materials, a cataloging manual. For example, a with note is the final note as prescribed by AACR2. Therefore, if a with note is applicable, you enter field 501 as the last 5XX field. For serials cataloging in English, enter notes according to concert practice. Concert participants enter 5XX fields in ascending tag order, except for fields 533 and 539. Enter fields 533 and 539 as the last notes. Your ILS may display the 5XX fields in a specific order. The 500 is the general note, and this one lets us know that there is a 3-page program note written in English, and it's also inside the container. The 588 note, source of description note, has a first indicator of 0, which is for source of description. Historically, the 588 field was used for serials, but is now used for all formats. For this record, we learned that the cataloger found the title on the container. The 546 note, language note, states that the music is sung in Italian, French, and German, and that the program notes are in English. Typically, the 546 language code in the fixed field elements and the 041 field language code mirror the same information. I will show you the fixed field elements in the 041 field in a minute. The 505 fields formatted contents note have zeros for both indicators, which means that these are the contents, that's the first indicator, and enhanced, that's the second indicator. Subfield G is for miscellaneous information used for the disc number and the number of minutes and seconds. Subfield T is for the title, and subfield R is for the statement of responsibility, in this case, the composer. For books, it's typically the author. When using a combination of subfield G, subfield T, and subfield R, there is a period space after subfield G, a space, semicolon, space after subfield T, and when there is a subfield T, subfield R combination, there is a space / space to separate each entry. Use space, double dash, space. Each 505 field should end in a period. In the above example, there are several titles in subfield T, followed by a subfield R for the composer and performers, so that the cataloger doesn't have to type the composer's name over and over. And it just makes it look a little bit cleaner, in my opinion. Okay, so here we are looking at the language code in the fixed fields, which is coded for Italian. It's up there in the upper right-hand corner. And then French in the 041 field, Italian, ITA, French, FRE, and German, GER, are in subfield D. language code of sung or spoken text. English, ENG, is coded in subfield G, language code of accompanying material other than librettos and transcripts. The 041 field has a first indicator of 0, indicating the item is not a translation, does not include a translation. And according to OCLC's bibliographic formats and standards, use the predominant language code for a multilingual item that has 2 to 6 languages. If predominance cannot be determined, use the code that is first alphabetically. If the multilingual item has more than 6 languages, use the code for the language of the first title in field 245. If the item is multilingual with no predominant language and the cataloging institution has chosen not to specify a language, use code MUL. In this case, the predominant language is Italian. Okay, so here are some more 505 fields, the formatted contents note. Since there were 5 disks, a separate 505 field was created for each disk. However, the cataloger could have put all 5 disks in one 505 field. The 511 note, participant or performer note, has a first indicator of 0, which means that no display constant is generated. Notice that musicians and singers are listed. The 518 note, the date, time, and place of an event note, informs us that the opera was recorded in May and June of 1940. The 518 and the 033 fields are used in conjunction with each other. And let's look at an example from this same record. We're going to look at the 033 and the 518. So here they are. So the 033 and the 518 fields work together. The 033 field is a date, time, place, and event. So the first indicator 1 means that there are multiple single dates, and second indicator 0 means that it is capture date. Contains coded data about the capture date and place. So the date, time, and or place of recording, filming, execution, broadcast, or finding in the case of a naturally occurring object. If an item is recorded or filmed on one date and broadcast on another date, record the information for each event in separate 033 fields. Use field 518 or other 5XX fields to enter this data in note form. Do not use field 033 unless you also use field 518 or another 5XX field. Record this information in an eye-readable form in the record. The 518 tells us that the opera was recorded in May and June of 1940, and the 033 field presents the same information, but in the year, month format. Okay, so here are the 5XX fields for Fanjet On. It's an opera, a German opera, and it was cataloged by CMC staff for the Roosevelt University Library. There's a 505 formatted contents note, but those were not displayed in this screenshot. The 500 general note informs us that the program notes are written in English. It's 20 pages long, and it's inserted in the container. The 508 field, Creation Production Credits note, records Michael D. Richter as producer. The 511 field, Participant or Performer note, lists all the tenors. The 538 field, System Details note, gives us specific information on how to listen to the opera. So it tells us that the CD contains MP3 files that may be played on CD MP3 player or a PC with MP3 capable software, or transferred to an iPod or other MP3 player. The 546 field, Language note, informs us that the opera is sung in German, Italian, and French, and that the program notes are written in English. Remember from a previous slide that the 546/language fixed field 041 should all be present to record the language of the manifestation. We will look at the language code in the 041 in a minute. When an item is in one language, however, do not add a 546 field. The 588 field, Source of Description note, informs us that the cataloger found the title on the container. So here is our example of the language code and the language fixed field element. So the 041 is coded as GER for German, and the 041 field has German, GER, French, FRE, and Italian, ITA, in subfield D, which is the language code of sung or spoken text. English, ENG, is coded in subfield G, language code of accompanying material, other than librettos and transcripts. The 041 field has a first indicator of 0, indicating the item is not a translation and does not include a translation. Our next example is the Firebirds of Paris, and this is an opera CD that the CMC cataloged for Roosevelt University Library. So here are the 5XX fields for Firebirds of Paris. So from the 546 field language note, we see that the opera is sung in French with program notes in English. The first 500 general note gives us information about the music and accompaniment. So it just tells us about opera arias and songs, that there is orchestra accompaniment. Track 6 and then 16 through 17 and 19 have piano accompaniment, and track 18 has flute and piano accompaniment. The second 500 note informs us that these recordings were previously released. And then the third 500 note describes the 23-page insert. The 511 field, participant or performer note, lists the performers. The 518 field, date, time, and place and event note, informs us that the opera was recorded between October 24th, 1927 and October 3rd, 1949. Okay, here's some more 5XX fields for the Firebirds of Paris. So the 505 field formatted contents note lists the title in subfield T, miscellaneous information in subfield G, and the statement of responsibility, typically composer and or performer, in subfield R. The 588 field source of description note informs us that the cataloger found the title on the container. So here is the language in the 041. So the language fixed field element 041 field for Firebirds of Paris. So the language code in the fixed field elements is coded as FRE for French. The 041 field has French FRE. In subfield D, language code of sung or spoken text. English ENG is coded in subfield G, the language code of company material other than librettos and transcripts. And the 041 field has a first indicator of 0, indicating the item is not a translation or does not include a translation. And the 040 field has been truncated in this screenshot for display purposes only. The OCLC record includes the entire field if you want to look that up. Okay, our next example is The Black Echo, The Black Ice, which is an audiobook, and this was cataloged by CMC staff for the Chatham Area Public Library District. So here are some of the 5XX fields for Black Echo, Black Ice. Typical 5XX fields for an audiobook include the 500 general note, the 505 formatted contents note, the 511 participant or performer note, the 520 summary, etc., and the 588 source of description note. From the 500 notes, we find out that the release date was supplied by the publisher. The audio was originally released on cassette in 2000, and the container is 17 centimeters. There are 2 books included on this CD, The Black Echo and The Black Ice. The 511 field informs us that the narrator is Dick Hill. The 520 gives us a brief summary statement, and the 588 tells us that the cataloger found the title on the container. Here's another example. This is Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and it's an audiobook CD, and the CMC staff cataloged this for Tri-City Public Library District. So here are the 5XX fields for Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. For this audiobook, there's a 588 note. The first indicator 0 is for source of description. In this case, the cataloger found the title on the container. The 511 participant or performer note records that Michael Jaston is the narrator. The first indicator 0 is for no display constant generated. The 520 summary, etc. note provides a brief summary statement. And then the 508 creation production credits note gives us producer information. So if you look at the 508, you see there is an executive producer, there was a Penguin producer, and then there was Audio Go Limited was the producer of the entire CD. Okay, here are some of the resources that I used to create this presentation. So Mark 21 format for the bibliographic data. Of course, OCLC bibliographic formats and standards, Library of Congress digital collections, and then the 5XX sound recordings RDA that is on the Yale EDU website. And if you've not ever used the Yale EDU website, please go look at their website. They've got some really great resources and examples, and it's almost as lovely as Bib formats and standards. For those of you who know me, I'm constantly looking at Bib formats and standards. So, okay, so today on the call, we have me, Dr. Pamela Thomas, Sherry Schuler-Faust, Heidi Margold, Mary Cornell, Eric McKinney, and Barbara Scobie. She started with us last week. Please post your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question verbally. Just remember to mute yourself after your question has been answered. And give me a hot second and I will allow people to unmute themselves.
So far, we don't have any questions in the chat box.
We don't have any questions in the chat box? What? That's crazy. Okay. That wasn't helpful. There's what I need. Okay. All right. So everyone should be able to unmute themselves if they want to.
So Eric says, welcome, Barbara. And we all welcome Barbara.
Yes, we do. Okay. Do you have a resource for the AACR2 order for 5XX fields?
Erica, there really isn't an order anymore.
Right.
There was an AACR2, but that
RDA doesn't.
They don't. RDA does not.
No.
And actually, OCLC never really never cared about the order. And I don't know what library you're with. I know Polaris, orders them in numerical order. They don't. So if you have a 588, you may put it as your first note, but it's going to go all the way down to the bottom. And I don't know what library you're with, or your system may do something different.
No, Eric, I don't know the concert order for serial F5XXs, but I can look that up. And I know there had been common practice to put the 588 as the first 5XX, but and I'm not sure where that practice came from, because it didn't come from RDA. So that might have been an AACR2 thing, but I don't know.
Well, it used the 588 used to be, well, as far as like sound recordings, it used to be in a 500 note, and you could put that 500 note first. They wanted the source of title information to be the first note, but now that it's in a 588, it's going to go to the bottom. So
right,
yeah, that's just, I think even when you do it in OCLC, you could put it as first note, but I think it's going to shift it down to the bottom.
Yeah, we'll have to do a little experiment.
Yeah.
See how things are displaying. But yeah, and a lot of times it's whatever ILS you have, and however they have things set up, and what's being displayed and in what order, especially those 5XXs. Okay, BYU has good overview of notes and note according to difference.
Yeah. So that's the order. I kind of remember the order a little bit, but I know that the 511 went before the 508, and the 521 went before the 520, but I can't remember too many other ones.
And then Erica says, I think too, we should consider order of 5X's based on what's helpful for patrons in the OPAC display. Put those fields toward the top. I agree. And also just talking with your ILS, and like if you feel like any of those are more important, just making sure that they are displayed. Because I don't know if if they all display every 5XX field or not. Because sometimes the people at the ILSs don't really understand everything in MARC records and what fields catalogers think should be displayed.
Yeah, I know in our ILS, we can say which notes display, and I'm sure that most of them do. And
Yeah.
that's the best, if you don't, I think, yeah, but when you have just a note in a 500, if you say display an actual just 500,
right.
You could possibly get a lot of notes. So I don't,
True. Yeah, and if people are using like their phone to look at stuff, then like an entire note could take up the entire phone screen. Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions? Once the recording has been completed, I will put a link to the recording once that's ready. Which 5XX fields don't end in a period, or does it depend on the bib description? No, it's, I want to say the 586, am I wrong? Doesn't end in a period. There are just a few.
The 536.
Is it 536?
536, the one that's the sponsor or funded my note. I know that doesn't. Your note on who, like if it's a Caldecott win or something, that doesn't end in punctuation.
Yeah, I think that's a 586.
Yeah, I think it is too. I always have to look at the formats for that.
Me too.
Let's see, I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, Lisa said the 586 awards note does not end. Yep.
Yeah, I think most of the other ones do.
Yeah,
but
I think so
I know
too.
for sure the funding one and the awards one does not.
Right. But yeah, just looking for formats and standards, and just, although sometimes they don't have the ending punctuation when they should. So sometimes you just need to look at records too.
Hi, this is Donna. I have a question.
Sure.
This is more about copy cataloging rather than original.
Okay.
But can you ignore some of these notes when you're trying to match a record? Like in your example earlier in the presentation, you said that a volume hadn't been released yet. So you stuck a note in there, but what if time has ticked on and that note no longer applies? And I now come along and I see that, and I've got volume 2, but there's that note and it's really not accurate anymore. So sometimes I look at my matching and I think, maybe I can't say yes to all the notes.
The notes aren't actually a matching point.
No.
Right, I know that,
yeah,
but I'm just.
Well, okay, so the history behind it. So this was a humorist, columnist, and so this was volume 2 that I was cataloging, and then he had stated that volume 1 had not been compiled yet. I think he was just trying to be funny, but it's not really funny when you're a cataloger because.
Okay, I see. Maybe he was just joking.
So why I made a note instead of, because I could have made that a 4XX, right? I could have made it a 490. But I didn't really trust him that there really was going to be a volume 1 coming out. So instead I just made it a note. And yeah, if he makes me a liar and it actually comes out with a volume 1 in the future, but I mean, that's still accurate information because I copied it from the title page. It was a quoted note.
Okay.
But in that case, if volume 1 does come out, then you would need to create a 490 and an 830 or 800, whichever is applicable. So yeah, real funny, Mr. Man.
Well, I was just curious if if some of the notes, ever get tweaked again, I guess, because time has ticked on and they're just not as accurate as they were.
You can definitely tweak them.
Small library. Or somebody coming up, after the fact and editing the record, I guess.
Okay.
But most catalogers don't really have time to go back and
Right.
do that kind of cleanup because it's not vital, really, in my opinion. But sorry, Sherry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say you can tweak your bib records after after time if things change. That's okay. And there's just a lot of notes and records like the commitment to retain record that's in OCLC. Why would you don't need to bring that into your your catalog? You're not that you don't have that commitment to retain. I see that note a lot. There's other, like some people are still putting in the OCLC records, I have a signed copy. Well, you're not supposed to do that, but they're in there. So there's a lot of notes you can definitely ignore.
Yeah, those should not be in the WorldCat record.
Right,
they should just be in your local record. Yeah,
right.
I see those too.
But the note that Pam put in, it's a quoted note, so it's still coming from the item.
Yep.
So if you get the second or the first book,
first one, yeah,
you wouldn't attach to that record, so it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
And maybe he'll do volume 1 and 3. You just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions either related to this presentation or just any general cataloging questions? You can ask them, write them down in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask them verbally. Radio silence. Nothing.
It appears that we don't have any more questions.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody for attending. And as a reminder, so once this is over, I'll put the presentation slides with the notes in L2 so you can look at them and read them at your leisure. And our next one is in January, and sorry, it's by me again, so you gotta listen to me. It's the final one that I'm doing in our fiscal calendar year, though. So Lisa says, just another thank you, Pam, for your reality CMC cataloging course. I've been using your info a lot lately, so thank you, and thank you for all these CMC webinars. Oh, Lisa, you're welcome. Yeah, and I know I need to put the Moodle classes in L2 for this next year. I have to decide when I want to teach them, though. So I will share the news when I decide when. But I'm teaching my 4th class in a row, and it ends Sunday, and I want a little bit of time off from teaching. So, okay, well, thank everybody, and hopefully you can join us in January.